Chapter 16. Noah and the Old Man. So, if she hadn't eaten the candy floss, said the old man, setting the puppet he'd been carving on the table half finished, then picking up the empty dessert plates and walking slowly across to the sink, where he turned the taps on, threw a couple of dishcloths in, and let them get on with their work. Why was she feeling ill? Noah looked down at the table and started running his fingers across a dent in the wood that had been made, he assumed, by an out-of-control chisel. He didn't say anything, didn't look up, and hoped the old man wouldn't ask him any more questions of this sort. "You don't want to answer me?" asked the old man eventually in a quiet voice. And Noah looked across at him and swallowed hard before shaking his head. "I don't want to be rude," he said, and as he spoke he found that his voice was coming out much more forcefully than he'd intended. "But now I've run away from home, I think it best if I don't think about my mum and dad at all, or talk about them." "Well now, that's a very strange thing to say," said the old man, turning round and staring at him in surprise. "First your mother stands up for you against the security guard who's wrongly accused you, then she makes a beach out of a swimming pool, and then she takes you out of school to go to a fair, and you don't want to talk about her. Why, if I'd had a mother like that—" "Well, I never had a mother, of course. I only had Papa," he said sadly. "But still, I don't understand why you don't want to be with her." Noah thought about this for a long time before answering. "It's not that I don't want to be with her," he said, growing more frustrated now. "Oh, it's so difficult to explain. The thing is, she made me a promise, you see, and I think she's going to break it, and I don't want to be there when that happens." "You think she's going to break it?" "Yes." "And what promise did she make?" Noah shook his head, making it clear that he didn't want to say. "Well, I'm very sorry to hear it," said the old man with a sigh, "although I suppose we all make promises we can't keep from time to time." "I bet you've never done it," said Noah. "Oh, if you thought that, you'd be very wrong. You should have heard the promises I made. When I was a boy. Do you know, everything my father ever did in his whole life was for my well-being, but time and again I let him down, running off and having adventures, getting into all sorts of trouble, and if you want to talk about promises, well, I've had to live with a broken promise my entire life. Now, would you care for some tea? A cup of coffee, perhaps?" "I don't drink tea or coffee," said Noah, making a face that suggested he'd just eaten a barrel of rotten apples. "But I like a glass of milk if you have one." The old man opened the fridge and buried himself inside it for a moment, finally emerging with a frosted pitcher of cold milk, from which he poured a tall glass for Noah and set it on the table before him. He picked up his wood and chisel and started chipping away again. Noah took a drink from the glass and then reached into the box again, selecting another puppet. And this one made him smile. He had a very thin body, a very square head. He looked like he'd been based on a man who was composed of a set of geometric shapes, rather than one with arms, legs, and torso. "Ah, Mr. Quaker," said the old man when he saw it, laughing a little as he shook his head. "I'm rather surprised that my father carved a puppet of him, because if Mr. Whipple was the man who got me interested in running, then it was Mr. Quaker who made me realize how many different ways I could use my gift. You talk about promises, Noah, but it was because of Mr. Quaker that I broke one to my own father." A wooden chest, open